Hi, and welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. And today, on this very rainy, dreary Friday, which seems perfect for talking about horror, we are joined by AM Shine.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Not a problem, not a problem. I have just finished reading The Watchers, which you're going to be talking about today, which is exquisite. I absolutely loved it. So I've got to try and beg a copy of your next book now as well. So
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So it was, yeah, just phenomenal. Let's get on to some questions. So such a fantastic kind of the setting of rural Ireland. Does this kind of draw on real experience for you? And have you ever been spooked out in the middle of the countryside?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think the Irish landscape itself, it has a certain kind of somber beauty to it, especially the west of Ireland, like where it's set in Connemara. It's very isolated, very rural. Like the weather you're experiencing today, it is inhospitable to live out there, you know? So I think it's always important to treat the landscape as a character, especially in a horror novel, you know, because you're trying to elicit a certain sense of menace and something sinister from it. And especially with The Watchers, because it's based around survival, we are bringing in the cold and the elements, and we're just taking what I'm sure is Connemara is beautiful on a summer's day, but that's not what we're focusing on, you know. So you just gotta twist it to suit your needs, really, you know.
And what was your kind of starting point for The Watchers? So when did the kind of idea come to you?
Okay, it actually came from like a lot of this and The Creeper. They both came from a short story that I've written over the last 10 years. So The Watchers was a very, very short piece. It was about a collector of rare birds, or a dealer of rare birds. And he wasn't a very nice man. He kind of enjoys having these animals in cages. And he's dropping this bird up towards the west. Much like The Watchers, his car breaks down. He goes into a wood and he finds this building. Now, in the original short story, he was on his own, and like it was very, very short. So when he gets there, he finds this room it wasn't a mirror in the short story either. It was just a window, and he sees things in the woods outside. And at one stage, one of these creatures, an infant of the species, comes up to the glass and starts tapping at it. So he leans down towards it, and he's about to reach for the glass as well, until the mother of the creature whips it away, because naturally he's the animal in the zoo and they don't want the kids getting too close to him. So just kind of twisted on that, you know. So it was a story I wrote that I never sent anywhere, but I just love the idea of having this building in the woods with these things out there behind the glass. So when I designed the character of Mina, I had this kind of location in mind. So designed Mina, and then I just sent her to this bunker, and then just kind of started plotting it from there, really, you know. So it was a very small little kernel of an idea that grew into a full novel.
Wow. And talking of the characters, who is your favorite character, and why is it the parrot?
I really appreciate it when people specify that the parrot is their favorite character. I don't know why people love the parrot so much. It was such a minor thing. But then again, you know, it's hard to, excuse me, knock my laptop. It's hard to give personality to a little bird that doesn't really do anything, you know. It's just a dancing on the perch, the odd little facial expression. Not that I know much about parrots' facial expressions, but yeah, I just don't know. He becomes like just a symbol for their kind of humanity, and he's the only trace of color in a book where everything feels so black and white. You know. If I had to pick a favorite character, of course, Mina is. I love Mina. I just love her as a character. I love writing her. You know. But then Daniel also. I think Daniel is just probably one of my second favorite anyway, I'd say. I know people like Madeline, but you know, I love them all really. You know, my least favorite is probably Kira.
For reasons.
For reasons.
And kind of as we touched on before, obviously the kind of the desolate nature of being out in the wilderness, and also kind of having the kind of the wide expanse of the forest, and then a very kind of trapped feeling inside the cabin itself. So yeah, where did you kind of, what really came first, I suppose? Was it those characters coming fully formed, or was it that idea of the juxtaposition between the huge open space and the really tiny kind of
I think
scary?
it was, I suppose the forest came first. I reckon I just wanted to use that as a setting, especially in Connemara, because it is, like you said, it's so isolated, you know. The only character that was fully formed when I started writing was Mina. I wrote a lot about her before she even got there, you know, because I do think when you design your protagonist, that they should in some way kind of reflect the horror of the book.
Yes.
So all of Mina's interests and her skills, they play in perfectly to what the horror is eventually kind of revealed to be. You know, it was only when I actually got Mina to the coop, I hadn't planned any characters until that stage. All I knew was that Madeline was going to be there. Well, I knew there's going to be a woman, but it basically was all just done on the fly, kind of step by step, you know?
Yes.
Like a lot of the ideas in the book that kind of, I guess, have made it so interesting are the ones that came to me kind of on the fly, you know? Because at the time I was just, you know, I wasn't a contracted author. I was writing this novel, hoping, of course, that I would get it out into the world, but I was still also just kind of playing with it a lot, you know? So yeah, I guess the woodland came first, the landscape and the location, and then just trying to find the most interesting characters to populate it and have the, you know, this disparity between the personalities. So, you know, there's a nice mix in there.
Yes.
And it's important too, I found, this because it is a tale of survival, you wanted to make them as three-dimensional as possible. You know, they can't all be like flawed or perfect. It's a blend of all of them. So the idea was that as Mina's trapped in there, much like her own impression of these characters, yours should change as the story goes on. So sometimes you might have a lot of time for Daniel, then he might annoy you. Likewise with Kira, you know. The only one who's kind of constant throughout the book is probably Madeline. She doesn't really shift too much on her stance at all, you know. But that's why we love her. That's why we love her, you know.
Yes, she doesn't takes no shit, right?
No. Rules are rules, Laura.
Yes, exactly. Don't break those. So we also have like a really interesting element of kind of the forest versus technology. Which is super interesting, and something I read recently in The Hollow Places, the T. Kingfisher, which made me kind of think of that idea of having almost, you're part of this world, but you're in another world, and you can't rely on being able to use your phone or, you know, Google Maps or whatever. So do you think kind of, I suppose, these modern technologies that we rely upon now, they make us kind of these ideas more scary in a way that we can't actually cope in the wilderness anymore?
No, I agree totally. Yeah, I think that's probably part of the kind of, you know, the folk horror genre. Its ethos really is kind of based around isolation and removing all of the modern luxuries that we rely on. And like you said, no phone coverage, no heat, you know, everything that kind of makes our lives luxurious almost day to day now. Just remove all of those and then see what you've left. And because the coop is this man-made structure, it is the only kind of thing that relates to contemporary living, but it's nothing like that. Instead, it torments them. All it does is confuse them with questions, and there's nothing comfortable there at all, you know. So there is that juxtaposition of mixing in the modern and the old, but still remains dark as hell, you know. And I love that also. You know, any story where you have take, for example, like go back to a video game, for example, like the first Resident Evil game, where you have like an old mansion. Like that game is amazing to play, but it really, the biggest twist in that game is when you go underground and suddenly it's a laboratory.
Yes.
You know, it's that jarring change, you know? And that's what we've here. We have a woodland and we basically have a building that really should not belong. You know, you can't understand why it's there or who built it. And I think in any horror story, that element of mystery, especially if it's a mix of two different kind of times, it's just wonderful. You know, it's very intriguing.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. It's all those questions of why is this here?
Exactly. Yeah. You got to put as many questions as possible and keep the reader guessing as to where it's going, you know. And then all the while too, you have this horror backdrop hidden behind the mirror, you know.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, so good. And you had as well, I suppose there's the element of, you know, when you're watching a horror or reading a horror, and there's always the element where the character does the thing that you think you would never do. So the character goes into the forest, or the character goes up the stairs, and you're like, what the hell are you doing? Whereas obviously each protagonist has done this at a certain point in your book where they've gone into the forest and, you know, chaos ensues. Would you follow suit if this was real life? Do you think you'd go cannonballing into the forest? And
I think, yeah, well, take Mina's situation, I probably would, because she knows that she's been driving so long, there's nothing behind her. It's still a bit daft to go in, but I understand why you would. I don't know why she went so deep, you know, but still, she did. Daniel, again, his bike would have broken down outside. He would have walked in himself. I guess it's because of his location, because there's no going back, because there's nothing behind you. You have to kind of go forward, you know? So yeah, I think those daft decisions are just kind of part and parcel of a horror novel, aren't they? You know?
Yes.
But most decisions in the book, I think you can kind of justify to some degree. No one does anything particularly stupid, I don't think.
No.
You know, we're not allowed because Madeline's there. You know, that's her being there. You know,
no misbehaving. So
no.
no. I suppose we have to touch on obviously the very exciting news that there is going to be a film.
Yes. Yeah. So, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that one. Actually, yeah. Like the book only came out in October 2021. On my birthday, actually, it was published, which is quite a coincidence. Yeah. And there were a few. There are a few bites. I remember my wonderful agent, John Baker, he always was kind of like, you know, don't get too excited. You know, there's always kind of whispers of these things happening, but let's just focus on the books, you know. But there were a few bites, and then before Christmas, he rang me and he basically put me to the floor. I couldn't believe this phone call when he said that the book had found its way onto M. Night Shyamalan's desk, and that he read it and he really enjoyed it. And they wanted to have a one-to-one, like a chat. So that was an amazing conversation. So yeah, it's something else, you know, because he's such a creative force to chat to. Like, he knew the book so well. He had all these questions relating to the more kind of ambiguous parts of the book. So anything I left very, very vague, he would have maybe like an idea or something that could explain it. And the ideas are so good. Like, if I had them myself, I probably would have incorporated them into the novel, you know. So yeah, we had a great chat, and then that kind of got the ball rolling, and then just the negotiations kind of happened without me really realizing it. And then before we know it, then there's a deal. So yeah, it's a strange thing. So, you know, when you write the book, you never really think that this is going to happen, you know. And then I had the great pleasure of chatting to Ishana as well. I got to read an early draft of the film script, which is one of the most kind of uncanny things I've ever done, because when you're reading a book that you've read, I probably read The Watchers how many times during edits, and then to read this the same but different version, because you know, I understand that, you know, film and literature are two different art forms, two different forms of entertainment. So, you know, they can't be identical. That's be an element of kind of just like translating one to the other. But I thought the film script was amazing. I got my heart racing again. You know, I was actually just really, really into it. And from what I've read and what I've heard from Ishana and what's going on, I think it's going to be wonderful. You know, I really genuinely cannot wait to watch it.
Oh my God. It sounds incredible. I mean, it's obviously there recently with like Knock at the Cabin and stuff.
Yes.
Phenomenal. Yeah. So yeah.
I think one of the strangest things is going to be, who they cast for the characters. I think, you know, you all have, well, I especially have ideas in my head of what everyone is like and what their appearance is like, you know, so it's going to be very cool to see who's cast.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And then hopefully I'll be allowed to visit their set and, you know, actually see the buildings, you know, the building that I've kind of like, that was in my head for so long, like, you know.
You might have a weird like moment of seeing it.
Just have like some kind
PTSD,
of like, suddenly you're inside your horror book. Jesus, like how do you react to that? So no, it's amazing news, and I'm just amazed by how organized they are as well. Like they plan to release this as early as June next year. You know, it just shows, you know, the level of professionalism and skill they have to organize something like this. You know, like they're probably making this movie in less the time it took me to write the book. You know,
putting you to shame.
I know, mad.
Oh my god, it's very, very exciting news. So yeah, I can't wait to see it as well. I can't wait to. It's going to be amazing. So just coming back to you obviously have a second book as well. So does it? I am yet to read it, but it is happening very soon. Does it have kind of similar motifs and themes?
Again, it probably could be classed as folk horror. This one is very much set around superstitions and how they affect our lives. So do you want a quick rundown of what it's about?
Can you do it without too many spoilers?
Oh yeah, actually, I won't spoil it for you at all. It's complete. It's a standalone story. It's very dark, very creepy. I love it. I absolutely adore this book. You know. But yeah, it's the same Irish themes, again, isolation and just being cut off from, you know, all the support networks that you have. That's all in this book as well. Yeah, I think people thought that The Watchers was quite creepy. This one is much darker, I think. It's quite more sinister, you know. Okay. And it's set over only a few days, which I think is a wonderful way to do horror books because, I don't know, it just puts a lot of pressure on the characters because there is kind of a timeline in this, like a countdown that they have to kind of work against. Okay. Right. And much like the Watchers as well, survival kind of relies on understanding what exactly is out to get you. You know, so I can't wait for you to read it. You must let me know. Oh my god! Yeah,
very, very, very excited. You shall be emailing Polly as soon as we're done.
Get on it.
Okay, done. So yes, and obviously it has another phenomenal cover as well. So did you have much involvement with those cover designs?
We have. That was our Watchers. Luckily, no, I don't actually have any kind of say in this. You can see then the similarities between the two. No, Head of Zeus did an absolutely wonderful job on those, and they look especially nice when you have them kind of, you know, side by side.
Yes.
But no, I'm not an artist. I leave all that work to the professionals. You know.
Well, they've done a phenomenal job. So
I agree. I totally agree. Yeah.
Very, very nice. And to kind of round off our interview today, so I'm always intrigued about what authors are reading, playing, watching right now. So yeah, what's kind of keeping you terrified right now?
I haven't actually. I kind of stopped watching. I can't stop watching television and movies a few months back. I haven't seen anything in ages. But when it comes to movies, I only watch horror movies. That probably comes as no surprise. But I just that's all I've ever watched. I never really got into TV series. I kind of didn't fit in there for a long time because I've never seen Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, anything. All these kind of you know, modern kind of pop culture you know, things. But book-wise, I finally finished reading, it's quite sad actually, my last Jonathan Aycliffe book, because he's an author who I absolutely love.
Yes.
And I only heard recently that he passed away during, I think it was last year.
Yeah.
Which is very, very sad. Because he wrote, I think he did like maybe 7 or 8 kind of proper old school ghost stories. Right. And they were my go-to books whenever I got a bit of a reading slump, or maybe if I'd read a book I didn't quite enjoy as I'd hoped. Yes. I'd always break out one of these Aycliffe books as a treat to myself, you know. But I'll return to them again. But for that, what have I read recently I really enjoyed? I really enjoyed Simone St. James' The Broken Girls. I loved that. That was a great book.
Okay.
I really like the way she works in 2 timelines and ties them together so seamlessly, so it works as like one narrative. And after that I read Stolen Tongues actually.
Yes.
The author's name is Felix Blackwell, I think. Because I noticed there's a few wonderful groups online, especially a big shout out to the group on Facebook. It's called Books of Horror. It's this wonderful community that just keeps on sharing sharing books between its members, you know. And I know for a fact that a lot of them have been very kind to my own books and been sharing the Watchers and the Creeper.
Yes.
And it's a great little place to jump into. I'm sure there are many like it as well, to jump in and see what everyone's reading, books that you might miss, you know. Because often websites like Goodreads and these, like if you go into like the whatever top 10 or 20 horror books they're recommending, they tend to be pretty much the same ones week in, week out. Whereas there's such a catalog out there that isn't really getting the maybe the push that they deserve, you know. So yeah, like horror books, like horror movies, like I'll love them all anyway. You know, it's just my thing, like, you know.
Yeah, it's a great time to be alive if you're a fan of anything horror, I think. So
absolutely, I think it's really enjoyed just a massive surge in popularity as well. Not that it hasn't always been popular, because you know, one strange thing, I think people who may have been kind of not against horror but slow to maybe give it a shot are now finally maybe giving the genre a go. Because I'm sure you've met people yourself who just say straight up, I don't watch horror movies, or I don't read horror books. You know. Whereas then you have the actual horror fans who are just, you know, so passionate about the genre. Like I said, it's all they read, it's all they'll watch. And I don't know, I think that's maybe why it's such a great genre, because it has the passion there, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And I think it has a way as well of, not only do you get scared, but you also kind of, I don't know, your fears are realized and rationalized to a way, and you kind of feel at the end like, oh, okay, good.
Yeah. It's like therapy, though, is it?
It is free therapy. So, but yeah, there's obviously some phenomenal books coming out. I'm just reading Boys in the Valley at the moment that Orbit have picked up, the Philip Fracassi, which is
okay,
scary shit. It's very good.
I must give it a go.
Yes, yeah, and Eric LaRocca, one to watch. Titan Books have recently picked them up, but phenomenal. Yeah, really, really.
Okay.
Good. Yeah,
thank you.
Definitely check those both out. But yeah, okie doke. Well, thank you so much for obviously joining us today and talking about The Watchers. So
thank you so much for having me. That's a pleasure. This you know, always a pleasure, and yeah, I'm sure I'll be talking to you again when I finish the next book. I hope so.
Yes. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us on FPTV.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.